This is the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel. Today is Friday, November the 28th. My name is Neil Saravanamuttu. I am joined by Joanne Chianello and John Willing. Hello to you both.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Joanne. Hello,
So
Neil.
I understand this is not your first panel of the day.
But it is our best panel of the day, Neil. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we were on CBC Morning today at 6:45. Felt like old times for John and I. They asked us to speak about the legacy of Jim Watson, who received the Order of Ottawa yesterday, and it was really fun, actually.
Yeah, in a way, I was just thinking about this afterwards, Joanne. Like, I feel bad that we spent so much time talking about Watson when there's so many other people who got the order last night who are very deserved. So I encourage viewers and listeners to really check out who else got the order as well, because there's some really impressive people on the list.
Yeah, we didn't get to talk about the fact that, like, should these awards even be for politicians? It's really, they get a lot of attention already. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of people who are volunteering or working hard and making a big difference who are under the radar, and that really should go to them, I think.
And did you talk about anything else, Joanne?
Well, I personally did not talk about anything else, but at the end, when they were saying goodbye, they said what John is doing now. He is a professor at Algonquin College of Journalism, as you know. And for me, they said I was a comm specialist and a consultant, and that I am running in Kitchissippi Ward next year for the 2026 municipal elections. I'd like to say it's like the best kept secret around in my community, but actually I'm not trying to keep it a secret. So, but I'm not like ready to have a big announcement. There will be a launch, of course. Plus, there's been a lot of elections this year. I don't think people want to officially talk about elections, but yes, I am planning to run in Kitchissippi Ward next year, all else being equal. So just figured I would also mention it on this pod and on this panel, the real panel.
Well, there we go. That's great to hear. And I think technically, Joanne, you are considering running. Is that right?
No. I am planning to run.
You're all in. Okay.
I literally have a campaign manager. If I said I was considering running, he would be on the phone to me saying, what is this work we're doing? No, we're planning. I'm planning to run.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful news. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are very happy to hear that. And
your ideas, people. If you have ideas, we would love to hear them.
Okay. So let's jump straight in. We have this is the budget month. Now, so we will be talking about a couple of different budget items, but first of all, we had a council meeting this week. It had one item and it was in camera. So in other words, confidential. We didn't get to see what was happening. However, we knew that it was about the purchase of a potential landfill site in the East End. Now, we talked about this earlier in the week. And so, John, maybe you can get us started and tell us what more did we learn coming out of this council meeting?
Not a heck of a lot more, actually. There wasn't a discussion that was had on the record or on the horseshoe out of the closed session. We learned that the city is going to participate in the acquisition competition. And we kind of learned that there won't be a vote before that. Before then, actually. So like we're going to find out if the city wins the land competition, and hopefully we're going to find out, we will find out, or expect, if we do win the competition, how much we're going to pay for it. So we didn't learn a lot of anything new that we didn't know already, and which wasn't really a lot after the committee meeting, but the council meeting certainly didn't shed any more light on the whole process.
Okay, now there was the media availability afterwards, which is where I think we got the few little tidbits that we got. That's where they essentially came out. And actually, Joanne, I have to say the media really pushed hard on the mayor, and his response was, what was the quote he used? That the process will continue, and we'll get more information once that process is over. So that was what he had to say. But I'm a little bit confused because has council made, they made a decision to go ahead. Does that mean if they are accepted that we've bought this land?
Yeah, I am shocked by the lack of information and the lack of clarity to that question that reporters put to him number of times. When you are asked, you're the mayor, and you are asked, will the final vote come back to council? And he doesn't just say yes. He says, any purchase will be the decision of the city council. What kind of answer is that? I'm actually really shocked and disturbed by the secrecy of this deal. I do not expect the city to negotiate in public. I do not expect to tell them what the bid price is in public, but I sent some questions to the city through the media folks. They just actually got back to me right before this podcast. And, some questions that should not actually be secret. It's like, when exactly did staff sign the NDA? Who signed it? Did staff get permission from council? And it might be that they did in camera, because when I look back, council has met in July and in September and October, so 3 times, to discuss a possible acquisition. So whether it's this, we don't know, but it could have been. What were the parameters of the NDA? And they say the legal team told the media folks at the city, they said, we cannot answer that. The answers to those questions are part of the NDA. And I have to say, it is not okay for city staff to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, that puts that much secrecy around city council. I really hope that they got council's permission to sign that and didn't just sign that on their own, because I think that's a really huge governance problem. You saw the mayor looking very uncomfortable answering these questions. I don't think he loved it. And I think that there's a lot of councillors who were shocked that there wasn't a vote in open session. There was a direction to staff in camera. What is that direction? It is obviously to proceed with the process, but is it to finish this deal? Because you cannot make a decision to spend what is probably $100 million, or more in camera. That's just not on. And so I'll be interested to see how this works out.
Sorry, Joanne, is it not on or is it not allowed? Like, could they, if they wanted to, make a decision?
I don't know. I actually don't know. And I've been asking with some folks around. I asked with people who are governance experts, who said, for sure, staff cannot just sign NDAs that puts elected officials in the position of not being able to talk about things without asking them. So that'll be interesting to see if they went to council for that. I'm still looking into the legality of that, but that the final vote is made in camera. And I am actually concerned about that. How many so-called directions to staff made in camera are really things that should be voted on in open session? So I think we're going to see more on the governance side of this. I know not everybody cares about governance, but because it sounds kind of highfalutin, but in fact, actually, it's what leads people to either trust their government or not trust their government. You cannot make big decisions in secrets.
No, absolutely. And further to that, John, we're going through this process of coming up with a strategy for solid waste. We had a meeting in June where 3 options were recommended out of 5 possible options. And the idea was that this would go away and come back in 2027 for further discussion and debate and conclusion. However, what we're hearing is that this process that Joanne's just been describing started in about April. We understand that the mayor's office was approached in April. So it's hard to imagine that these 2 processes were not going on concurrently. Is that, what do you think that's like? Do you think that they were going on together?
Well, I think they're happening, but I think even it was brought up at the committee meeting, the committee meeting that talked about the file. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's like they're almost like they weren't inclusive, they're exclusive. No matter what was going to happen, they're both on separate paths, but they do inform each other, obviously, right? Behind the scenes. You don't think council knew about this until recently, until it was put on the committee agenda. But it's funny, because staff knew that this was going on behind the scenes while coming up with a waste strategy for the city. And so here was like actually a solution to some of the waste problems that we were predicting over the next 10 to 20 years. And so I guess the next question is, does it solve the problem of where we're going to stash the trash in the long term? And I think it does. I think it does. So the question then will become, okay, so the city could potentially spend a lot of money on getting this property, and how much more is the city going to want to invest in the future or at all in other technologies to process residual municipal waste? So like landfill garbage, and how much effort is the city going to put into fact finding on garbage technologies like superheating and waste to energy? Like that technology will keep on advancing, hopefully, over the next 20 years. I got to tell you, I think it potentially locks in the status quo for curbside garbage collection. If all recycling systems are operating as they should, there is no urgency whatsoever to reduce residual waste. I wouldn't be surprised, actually, guys. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some talk around the council table about reversing the limit on garbage bags because we have a brand new dump at our disposal that we could send trash. Wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. What a thought.
That
What a
would be
thought.
terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right, though. You know, if this is a solution to, what is it? Stash the trash.
Stash the
But the
trash.
question is,
Nice.
are we going to pay the
Nice.
cash? Right?
Ooh, very nice. There should be a haiku.
Well, I have to say there's another solution too. You could also bring in source separated waste where you actually pay money, which it's already permitted at the Taggart Miller site, to actually pay to take the recyclables out. And I know now it's a producer system, so it's more complicated, but I'm not, I think if you have a landfill in particular, for sure, I think there's even more impetus to have as little residual waste as possible because you have a finite hole, for a better word, where you're going to put the trash. Whereas an incinerator actually needs a minimum amount of garbage. And actually there's way less impetus to keep stuff out of the waste stream when you have an incinerator. But we're going actually, the fact we're still talking about an incinerator, that's the other alarming thing we heard at the meeting. It's like, well, even if we buy this, it doesn't mean we're going to stop talking about an incinerator. I'm like, what? Why are we spending hundreds of millions of dollars on a landfill then if we're going to maybe buy an incinerator? What are you talking about?
But that's just talk, right? I mean, that's avoiding making a real decision and being public about it. It's a bit like, this whole Lansdowne process where it was never the final decision, right? So there's always off ramps. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so we, if I understand correctly, we do not know when the next step in this process will be. We do not know when the seller will make a decision on who will get to purchase this land.
Must be soon though.
Hopefully. And at that point, we expect
week.
to be told the price. Is that right?
But whether but before they buy it or after they buy it.
Yeah.
It sounds to me, guys, like after. Like at least there's an agreement to purchase that's on the table of some kind. And then I don't know. My sense, guys, is it's not going to come back to council again. There's going to be a reporting out of how much cash is sent over to the landowner for the transaction. I think what we saw this week was the final step until we might have the land.
What the report says is that staff will report back on the outcome of any acquisition through the Finance and Corporate Services Committee and Ottawa City Council. It doesn't say it comes back for approval. So it's hard to know. I mean, it's not like we are the preferred bidder is what it sounds like. And I'm sure that Taggart will take it.
Yes. Well, you know what? I have to say, I worry that we're going to overpay, but we will find out. I mean, remember that this is a piece of land and it's been permitted, but I don't see any reason why the city can't go through the permitting process itself. I know it takes a couple of extra years, but given the quote unquote crisis of landfill capacity in the province of Ontario, you have to think that the province would fast track any new solutions coming forward. So in any case, we will see what comes forward. And I think you're both right. I do worry that this is not coming to council for a decision. This is coming back to council to say, here's what you just bought.
Mm-hmm. So bad.
Well,
bad.
Quickly, I wonder what that direction of staff was in camera. Did it have an upset limit of the maximum number? Did the council direct staff to say pay up to this amount? So we'll be curious to know. Hopefully, there's some more reporting out about what exactly staff have been tasked to do.
Okay, let's turn to the budget discussion. As we say, it's budget month, and we had a couple of committees that that discussed their budgets this week. Before we jump into that discussion, I want to start with a question we had from a listener, which is really stepping back and asking delegations, do they make any difference? Is there a better way than spending 5 hours waiting to make your 5-minute presentation? So that's a fair question. I'd put it to you both. Is it worthwhile for people to show up?
Well, I would not want to discourage people from coming and getting involved. However, I have to say that almost nothing gets changed on the fly of the committee and council floor, because people don't come to council, right? And so if you are wanting to bring something forward and change something, and Neil, you're good at this, you need to advocate for this well before committee. And that's sometimes really hard, right? Because you got to know what's coming down the pike. Like if you want to get something in the budget, you better be organizing in June to do that, which, normal people don't have time to do that. But if you do want, I do have some pointers. Neil, you're good at this. Sign up first, sign up early. So you are among the first people, because you're also more likely to be quoted in any news story, right, John? Like that you're filing, and, by hour 7, the deadline is passed. You don't know what's going on. Not everyone is listening as closely. Neil, close your eyes on this part, close your ears on this one. Maybe don't be a frequent flyer. You know what I mean? Like, if you're there all the time on everything, people also start to discount you.
Yeah.
But also it can be good to go. Like, first of all, if you have a big point to make and you're going with other people who are going to make the same point, that sometimes can make a difference. I also think that talk to your counselor ahead of time, or a counselor who knows the same points that before you're coming. You might want to say to them, hey, I'm going to come and make this point, because sometimes they'll ask you questions. And also the things you say, if you have a really good point to make at committee, sometimes the counselors will pick that up and ask staff later. So I'm not saying there's no point to it, but if you're thinking you're gonna like turn over a recommendation, it's really hard, because by the time it gets to the committee floor, those votes are baked in, is my experience.
How about you, John?
Yeah, the one piece of advice I would say is try to humanize your point. Somehow put a human face on it, or a better human face is, and illustrate the impact of a city policy or city proposal has on an actual person. Like, it's the classic line, don't just tell, show. You're actually telling a story. This is kind of like a journalism thing too. But you're telling a story about the impact of a proposal or policy on people. What's at the center of a story? It's a person or people. So if you can humanize what you're trying to get through to the council members, I think you might be able to not hit everyone, but maybe have people at least ask you some more questions or raise some eyebrows. I'm not saying you're going to change, like to Joanne's point. You're already too late probably to make some wholesale changes in the budget. But if you add a little bit of heart to it, a little bit of human element to it, not only might you get some more interest around the table, but to Joanne's point again, you might get a media pickup, because what are journalists looking for? The human element in every single story. So if you get early on the list and you have the human element, and if you have a face on your story, you have a better chance to turn some more heads around the council horseshoe, but maybe in the community too.
Yeah. So you know what? It's correct to say that there's very little possibility that anything's going to change of significance in the budget at this point. So if someone coming to delegate, they're unlikely to move the needle on that, and that's probably true of just about every committee throughout the year. The other element about showing up early or being high on the list is that counselors are more likely to engage with you, right? And to ask questions, and to actually have a real discussion about it. So I have to say, I really hope that people don't take this the wrong way. I hope people will continue to delegate. Part of it is, people have views. They want to get that off. They want to express that. They want to say that to their counselors, the table of counselors, even if they know that it's unlikely to change any minds. But I think there's another really important element, which is that people like us, commentators and people that are trying to make sense of what's happening at the city, we get a lot of value from those delegates. In fact, the delegates and the questions to staff are probably the most important parts of those meetings, or certainly they're the parts where you can hear things that you just haven't seen before, that you will not find in the staff report. And I really, it's delegates that will expose new ways of thinking about issues that no one else will. So that's a really important role, and just part of good civic governance, I think. Okay, that is overview of the budget, but let's turn into the transit budget. So that happened at the beginning of the week. Joanne, if I have the numbers correctly, our transit budget is going to be about $939 million this year. So that's an awful lot. And it's important to note, of that 939, only about 200 of it comes from fares. So, over 700 million is being financed through other means. And I guess my question is, I know that transit is expensive. But it seems that we're almost in this in between world where we're not spending enough to make it truly effective. But at the same time, you ask people to put more in, they're going, "No, it's so crappy. I'm not going to put another penny in." So, is that how you would describe the situation we're in, or is there any outcome to this?
That's not a great way to think about it, but possibly accurate, right? Yeah, I think we need to put an enormous amount more in to make it better. But I think we are in such a holding pattern on two things. We're on a holding pattern for the LRT2 extensions to come because we're hoping that it is going to make it a lot better. And I think it will actually improve it. There will be people, for example, from Orleans, from the West End, who will be able to get downtown a lot better. I don't know that it's going to improve the inter-community transit much, although it might, right? Because you might have more buses available to that. The other thing that the city's they're waiting for the LRT upload shoe to drop. I mean, it's going to put in maybe like $85 million more into the operations, which isn't a lot of money. If LRT the debt and other costs are uploaded to the province. This is something that was mentioned in the budget. I mean, there's no actual line item in the provincial budget, I should say. So it was made. The LRT uploading was a very off the cuff promise made by the province, by the PC government in this year's provincial election. I cannot believe that was just this year. It seems like a very long time ago. But they also had a line about doing it in the budget. So it seems like the Treasurer Cyril Rogers said it seemed more real to him once he saw it in the budget documents, but there's no actual money attached to it. So yeah. I think they're waiting to see what happens there with those. Wait for the LRT to open, wait for the LRT extensions to be open, and also if the upload is going to happen. But in the meantime, I don't think they're going to put in $250 million more into the budget or into the transit.
Well, John, can I get you to pick up on that point about revenues and the fact that we've got what I guess I'll call them phantom revenues, right? It's this idea that we're going to get extra money from the provincial government or even the federal government, that we managed to stick it in. Just like every year we put in a certain amount that we estimate for fares, and we never achieve that level. So how is it that we do this every year? I feel it's like Charlie Brown and Lucy's pulling away the football, right?
Well, it's like it reminds me of Jim Watson always used to say at council, it's like Groundhog Day. You know that movie with Bill Murray, that things just keep happening over and over again. He once said if Bill Murray was a Canadian actor and we were up at press row, I'm like, no. Anyway, it has become an annual tradition though, Neil, to say in the transit budget, well, we're going to hope the upper levels of government will come through with some money at the end of the year. And this really picked up during the pandemic, right? When we saw the ridership plummet, obviously revenue was a huge problem. And the governments were backstopping in various ways, helping out municipal governments. But now it's become part of the tradition of making our transit budget. And who knows, like Joanne said, with the upload of the LRT, we have no meat on those bones. So again, we're hoping for the best. But I think for the city, it's easier to put forward a budget now that doesn't take a hatchet to operations and buy time to pull the rabbit out of the hat at some point in the calendar year. And I think that's been kind of the trend going into making the transit budget every year.
I think there's actually $47 million in the budget that we think is coming from the LRT upload in 2026. Who knows if it's coming? Yeah. But I think there might be room in the tax stabilization fund to pay for that if it doesn't come through. So it's just it's a shell game, really.
Okay. So Joanne, there were a number of motions put forward. So in other words, councillors said, here's an idea how we can adjust, improve, maybe add a few extra services. So can you tell us about some of the motions that came forward and what stuck out for you? What do you think might have some traction at council when this is finally discussed?
Yeah. So what happened? What I thought was really interesting was this entire idea that youths, teens about under 18, so about 11 to 18, I think, literally have to pay an adult fare. This happened last year. People were there's a big backlash from the public, said that is ridiculous. Like almost no other city has that. I think a lot of councillors didn't like it either. And so there's ways to try to make it free. One of the problems I'm understanding now, as I listen to the debate, is you don't want to make it free all the time because during the day, say you need it to go to school, that should be the school board's responsibility to pay for that, whether it's by school bus or by giving students a transit pass. And so I think for a long time, the city said, we have been, the municipal taxpayers have been subsidizing the school boards, and they should be paying for that. And I do actually see that. That is a good argument, but too many kids, I think, are falling through the cracks. And so the solution to that this year is a little convoluted, I have to say. So it's, the idea is looking for fares. If you're 18 and under, you can ride OC Transpo free on weekends and holidays, and they're exploring it for after 5 p.m. As well. So that's on the youth fare side. There's also an idea to this whole idea that people who are coming from far away, like Barrhaven, but even people from River Ward, they are not getting to their destination within the 90-minute transfer time.
Yeah.
So say you have to take the bus and the LRT, and then you have to switch to another bus that you need a transfer for. They're not getting there on one fare. Riley Brockington of River Ward was saying he was meeting young people who said, I had to pay twice and paying $8. He's like, do not pay $8. And so now they're looking to extend it to 105 minutes. I would like to say that the TTC has a 2-hour transfer limit in Toronto.
Yeah.
So that is one thing they're looking at. And as well, para riders 65 and over and older are going to maybe get 4 rides free per month. Now, all of this will cost about more or less $750,000. Now, they cannot find that in the transit budget, because where are they going to get the money from? So they really need it for, they need a higher what they need is a higher transit levy, and they are not allowed to vote on that, a transit for that, because there's these weird rules that if you want to spend more money, you got to find money somewhere in the same budget, which is ridiculous. I know people think that is some sort of discipline, so that we don't spend too much money, but also it gives zero latitude to actually improve things. So that is the argument that's going to go to council. We heard yesterday from Pat Scrimger that if they spend this extra $750 million, they will get another 600,000 rides, in a year. I'm like, that is a very good deal if you ask me. It's like $1.10 that we're spending to get that many more riders. And so I think there's going to be a lot of appetite for that at the council table. So when's the budget? December 10th?
Something like
something like that. And so that's the place where they're going to have to vote to say whether they can increase, because that's going to increase taxes a little bit more if they get that. So I'll be interested to see how that goes. I hope that passes.
Okay, John, last question on transit, and that's a number of delegates said you should not be increasing fares, and fares are going up by 2% is the proposal for next year. You should not be increasing fares when... Sorry, if I got it wrong?
2.5, I think.
2.5, sorry, okay. But the argument was we should not be increasing fares when the quality of service is not improving at the same time. Do you think that's a fair argument?
Yeah, I think it's a fair argument. But costs are going up across the city. People might be paying 3 3/4% more on their property taxes next year. And I'm not sure how many people would say that's fine because I see an increase in services. So same kind of thing. Maybe they'll see an increase in police services. I don't know. But I guess we'll wait and see. And it's interesting because it's hard to argue that property taxpayers aren't doing their part because the transit levy is going up 8%, maybe more, and the fare increase is 2.5%. I just don't think the city's in a position to hold the fares right now. And it would be nice. I agree. We saw some information at the commission that talked about the reliability is an issue right now. There's a lack of drivers, lack of available buses. There's construction gumming up the roads, so buses can't get through and make their schedules. So operationally, there's a lot of issues to respond to here. I know there's hope that things will improve in 25 with more buses coming on, and eventually stage 2, with the East End coming on, and then eventually the West. Hopefully that will be a resolution. But yeah, to your question, Neil, I'd be upset too. If you're someone who relies on paying on transit and you're paying more, but you're not seeing it improve for you on a daily basis, I'd be upset as well. So we'll see if those motions are passed at council with regards to the young people and the times. I don't know if it's going to get confusing about like when the free periods will be if all these things come in, but maybe that's for the communications department to work out after council.
Okay, let's turn to the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee, which met on Thursday. And just in case anyone doesn't remember, Public Works and Infrastructure, that's a fancy way of saying roads and sewers.
It used to be called Transportation Committee.
Yeah, that's right. And now there was discussion about the budget, but the really big topic was about the impact of Bill 60. And I'm not sure if that's law yet. This is the provincial bill that will prevent the use of any traffic lanes for bike infrastructure. So no conversion of a traffic lane into a bike lane. And so staff pointed out the some of the projects that will be affected by this. And there was universal condemnation by the committee. So that was good to see. But I guess my question for both of you is, do you think the city is doing enough to push back here?
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting comparison between Olivia Chow, the mayor of Toronto. She was like quick off the mark to say we cannot have this. And you know, the mayor, our mayor, is a little bit more circumspect. I think he has said he does not really support this. And we should note that council actually sent in a unanimously voted to send a letter to say to push back on Bill 60, because Bill 60 also includes a bunch of it's an omnibus bill. It's a crazy bill. It includes a bunch of stuff on landlord tenant stuff, and it makes it easier to evict tenants, but it also prevents us from building bike lanes. Naturally, this is in the same law. So you know, I think it would be nice to hear him push back. This is our mayor, Mark Sutcliffe, push back a little bit more forcefully. But again, speaking to those other issues we were talking about, the uploading of the 174 in Ottawa, the uploading of the LRT, the province has so much power over the city. Like basically, we get a lot of money from them. And what do you balance? You're thinking, are you on the verge of getting an LRT upload? And so you don't want to rock the boat too much with this? I don't know. Like, I personally would like to see a little bit more feistiness, but I can see why you might want to be circumspect too. So yeah, I guess that's also a Weasley answer. I'm already a politician, Neil.
Well, what do you what do you think, John? A sternly worded letter, is that enough?
Well, if I remember serves correct, they didn't want to participate in the last sternly word letter regarding the speed cameras, right? So, I mean, we talked about this recently on the pod, and to Joanne's point, yeah, we're kind of in a weird spot in Ottawa where we're hoping Queen's Park will take our LRT and give us more money for the things we need. And we're always like the almost like the second fiddle or third in Ontario, I don't know, compared to the GTA. So it's a tough spot for the mayor and council. They don't want to rock the boat too much with Queen's Park. And maybe that's why you're not seeing a strong arm approach by our city council.
You know, I actually think at some point, either our city or cities in Ontario actually need to take the government to court over this, because I do think that, you know, we always talk about how municipalities are the creatures of the provinces and therefore the provinces can do whatever they like. The truth of the matter is that in constitutional law, it evolves over time, and it evolves through people testing the boundaries. And you know, you could make a good case that the municipal governments are just not being given the ability to govern their cities the way that they need to. There's just too much interference by the provincial government, and I think it's something worth testing in the courts. So it's interesting because during the committee discussion, so one councillor asked the question of it was the Bike Ottawa advocacy group, whether they were part of any legal action against the province, because that had been done previously, the last time bike lanes came up, and the advocacy groups were quite successful in certainly in delaying it. But I actually think it's not the responsibility of the bike advocacy or other advocacy groups to challenge this in court. I think it's up to the cities. Now, I personally would love to see the city of Ottawa be more assertive on that front.
But you know, people did challenge that in court when the Ford government was first elected in 2018, like in May. By July, there was a municipal election on. That was in 2018. They like it was already underway, the election, and Doug Ford had the boundaries of the Toronto wards changed mid-election. I have rarely seen more blatant and inappropriate like interference in a local election. They went to court. It got like fast tracked because election is happening right now, and the courts, it went up the chain too, and the courts kind of said, yeah, they can actually do this. This is terrible. We don't like it. The judges were very against it. And so I think what you're looking at now is a constitutional challenge. And so it would be bad. It'd have to be bad enough that certainly Toronto and Ottawa would have to be involved, and then some of the bigger cities, the GTA cities, London. I don't know if you could get enough, but I would be really interested in that because, I mean, I argue for, change in the federal like in the fiscal framework because it's really bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I got one last question for each of you on this committee, and that is so John. And again, this is going back to I got a lot out of the delegations, and including a couple of delegations that said number one is the amount that we're spending on road repairs is much lower than what we should be spending based on sort of international benchmarking. Another one was reminding us that we have this $11 billion infrastructure financing gap, of which
have you heard of that before, Neil?
I have actually. I have. But a lot of that comes down to roads and sewers. So this committee here. And I guess the question is, when we look at the state of our roads and we complain about them all the time, is there any prospect that this is going to change anytime in the foreseeable future?
No. But I mean, like, hey, there's an election next year. I guess at some point, the city and maybe mayoral candidates and candidates for council in the future, I don't know, will have to consider whether how to fund the infrastructure deficit through some kind of infrastructure levy. I don't know, some special tax, some revenue scheme that's going to help fund maintenance, right? Or maybe we just need to learn how to love cold patch or hot patch or whatever they use to fill potholes these days, and learn to live with some crummy roads for a lot longer in our lives. Because right now, $11 billion is a lot of dough, and there's not a strategy yet that we've seen and I know we talk about it a lot on the pod. Maybe next year we'll see something, but there's not a strategy that's evident that's going to help fund the maintenance, right?
Well, you know what? I think what we're seeing is that we've got too many roads for the population base that we have in terms of being able to finance the maintenance of them. Joanne, I want to ask you a question about road safety. And we know that we are losing the funding that came from the speed cameras. And one of the questions that was asked by Councillor Gower was, is it possible to increase the money that we get from red light cameras? Because we still have red light cameras. And could that fill the gap for that we're losing from the speed cameras to support road safety?
Yeah. So since 2020, I believe that some of that camera goes into road safety. And for now, the road safety action plan is funded for a bit because we have a lot of money in reserves from the speed cameras. So we have like $10 million in there, but in the future, it's going to run down. Basically, the answer is the red light camera money, a lot of it goes into general revenues. Sure, we can take it from there and put it to road safety, but it's going to cause a gap anywhere. There's, you can move this around. I guess you could have like bajillions of red light cameras, but I mean, if we start to abuse that, what's going to happen from Queen's Park. There's only so many you can have, and you can't. It's also not really fair to just triple the fines for the red light cameras because we need the funding. But to Cyril Rogers' point, I mean, I feel for him because he says there's only so many sources of revenues, and we lost a huge, really good source of revenue from speed cameras, which also did a lot of social good. That went all towards the road safety action plan, right? That went to road safety. So the answer is no, not much. You could do it a little bit, but you're just basically, moving the chess pieces around on the same board, and you're not getting any extra. So not good.
Okay. Well, that's it for this week. We will be back in a week's time. There's plenty more committees that will be coming our way. So until next week, I'd like to thank both Joanne and John. I'd like to thank all our listeners for being with us today. If you have any questions or comments, please send them our way, and we will look forward to seeing you back in a week's time. Until then, this has been the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel.